You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I've been starting these shows off with recaps of the previous playoff games, NBA and then NHL. For me to not do that, there would need to be some gargantuan news. And there's no bigger news, even on a day that the Brooklyn Nets shocked the world and hired Steve Nash as their next head coach, than the death of Tom Seaver. When someone of the caliber of Seaver dies, even though he had been sick for a long time, that takes precedent over everything. Tom Seaver is without question one of the best pitchers in baseball history. What he did as a Met from the late 60s to the mid-70s cannot be overstated. It still resonates with the franchise. Yankee Stadium renamed part of Rivera Avenue. The Mets did something similar. They renamed one of the roads to Citi Field 41 Seaver Way. I mean, you want to talk about someone who just loved being a Met. There are very few of those. Seaver was one of them. He never wanted to pitch anywhere else. I mean, there are still thousands upon thousands of Mets fans that can tell you about 50 million Seaver stories. Whether it was a great game that he pitched, some personal anecdote, or anything in between. That's the kind of franchise icon we're dealing with here. And that's the thing that's come out through all this. The kind of man Seaver was. If you listened to the interview that I did with Pat Jordan, the author of the book Tom Seaver and Me, you got a glimpse into the kind of soul that Seaver was. Very humble man. Very generous man. Didn't like talking about baseball. He wanted to talk about you. He wanted to talk about life. He didn't like talking about himself. 2020 is a terrible year. Make no mistake about it. One of the worst years we've had ever in the history of the world. And sports have not been immune to that. Obviously, the 4-month pause. But every sport this year has had a heart-wrenching death. Basketball had Kobe. Football had Don Shula. Hockey had Dale Hawerchuk. And now baseball has Seaver. legends in their sports, all gone. Hall of Famers, all gone. 2016 was a really bad year for deaths. It's nothing compared to 2020. Tom Seaver started his MLB career in 1967 and put together one of the greatest rookie seasons in baseball history. He threw over 200 innings, threw 18 complete games. He went 16-13 with a 2.76 ERA en route to making the All-Star team and winning Rookie of the Year. In 1969, the Mets obviously won the World Series, the Miracle Mets beating the Orioles in 5 games. But while you probably knew that Seaver played an integral role in that, you may not know exactly. Seaver had an incredible year that year. The best year of his career. He went 25-7 with a 2.21 ERA. Again, he had 18 complete games. There are pitchers who will start their career next year, spend 20 years in the majors, and in their whole career won't have 18 complete games. Seaver had that in a season. It still amazes me whenever I see it. It didn't even lead the National League. Baseball was different back then, and Seaver was perfect for it. He pitched over 270 innings. He won the Cy Young Award. Almost unanimously, Phil Niekro got a vote for some stupid reason. All due respect to Niekro. He was not as good as Seaver that year. He shouldn't have even been mentioned in the same breath. Seaver also finished second in NL MVP voting that year, behind Willie McCovey. There are 2 famous games from '69. July 9th, Seaver nearly threw the first perfect game in Mets history. Got through 8 1/3 against the Cubs, and then some no-name schmagegi by the name of Jim Qualls broke it up in the 9th inning. The second one occurred in the World Series. Seaver made 2 starts in the postseason that year and really wasn't good. He pitched Game 1 of the NLCS. He got the win. He pitched 7 innings, but he gave up 8 hits, and he gave up 5 runs. He only had 2 strikeouts. Not a really good game. The Mets just took advantage of some sloppy Braves defense. Seaver then pitched Game 1 of the World Series that year. He only went 5 innings and gave up 4 runs. So when Seaver got the ball for Game 4, he was going on 3 days rest, was ineffective at best in the postseason, 1-1 with a 6.75 ERA. In 12 innings, he only had 5 strikeouts, and he had given up 3 home runs. That's not Seaver. And I don't want to say that the Mets really needed a win in Game 4, but it would have been nice. They were up 2-1. So if you go up 3-1, obviously, you put your foot on the throat of the Orioles. Seaver pitched one of the best games in World Series history. 10 innings of one-run ball. Yeah, you heard me correctly. 10 innings. I'm telling you, one of the greatest performances in World Series history. Obviously, he ended up getting the win there, and the Mets won the World Series. On April 22nd, 1970, Seaver tied a record that many people thought was unbeatable. 19 strikeouts in a game. He did that against the Padres. The Mets won 2-1. Seaver also struck out the final 10 batters of that game. That is still a Major League record. And that year, his strikeout numbers took an incredible jump. His strikeouts had steadily increased. 67, he had 170. 68, 205. 69, 208. In 70, it ballooned to 283. That led the National League. And somehow they went up again in 71. He had 289. Again, he led the National League. And he had a 1.76 ERA in 71. He didn't win the Cy Young Award that year, though, because Fergie Jenkins was insane. I'll fast forward a little bit to 1973. If I don't fast forward, we're going to be here for the next 10 years. That's how long I could go talking about Seaver's accomplishments. In 73, Seaver won the Cy Young Award again. He went 19-10 with a 2.08 ERA and 251 strikeouts. The ERA and strikeouts led the National League. The ERA led all of baseball. And once again, he had 18 complete games. That time, he led the National League. Interestingly enough, though, that's not his career high in complete games. His career high in complete games was set in 71 with 21 complete games. That did not lead the National League. In 73, Seaver was insane in the playoffs. He went 7 innings in his 4 starts that year in the playoffs and never gave up more than 2 runs. He had 35 strikeouts, yet somehow he only went 1-2, and the Mets ended up losing in the World Series that year to the Athletics in 7 games. What sticks in a lot of Mets fans' craws is the fact that Yogi Berra started Seaver on short rest that day. Their point was, don't start Seaver in Game 6, save him for a Game 7. Well, there's just one issue with that. When you have the opportunity to win a World Series, you have to take it. You need your best pitcher on the mound. Who else do you want in that spot? The only other guy who was going to get that start was George Stone. All due respect to George Stone, he had a really good year that year, 12-3 with a 2.8 ERA. was the best year of his career, but he's not Tom Seaver. I'm sorry. You want Tom Seaver out on the mound there to win a World Series. I never, ever understood that criticism of Yogi Berra. And here's the other thing. The decision actually worked. Seaver was great. 7 innings of 2-run ball. The thing is, Catfish Hunter pitched a fantastic game. 7 1/3. Only gave up 1 run. It's not Yogi Berra's or Tom Seaver's fault that the Mets couldn't solve Hunter. The Mets offense, which really wasn't that good to begin with. I mean, this was a really weak Mets team in 73. They didn't have anyone hit above 290. They didn't have anyone hit more than 23 home runs and have more than 76 RBIs. Not a good Mets team. But you've got to be able to score more than 1 run when you have the opportunity to win a World Series. The Mets had 2 elimination games in that series. Game 6 and Game 7. The Mets only scored a combined 3 runs. That's not Yogi Berra's fault. That's not Tom Seaver's fault. Blame the Mets hitters. Blame John Milner, Rusty Staub, Cleon Jones, Felix Milian, Jerry Grody. Blame those guys. Don't blame Berra. I never, ever understood that. In 1975, Seaver rebounded from a bad year by his standards. He only went 11-11. That was the first year that he didn't finish with a winning record. And he had a 3.2 ERA, by far and away the highest ERA of his career. And he only had 12 complete games. Only. That was the lowest total of his career. But he rebounded from that mark in 75 by winning 22 games, pitching 15 complete games, leading the National League in strikeouts with 243. He had a 2.38 ERA, and he won the Cy Young that year. In 1977, one of the darkest moments in Mets history occurred. The Midnight Massacre, as it's been referred to. Free agency had come into vogue. A lot of players were getting paid. Catfish Hunter, Reggie Jackson, Nolan Ryan. A lot of guys got paid. Seaver wanted a contract that would pay him just as much as what the other best pitchers in baseball were making. The Mets had someone in charge by the name of M. Donald Grant. He did not budge on this. He did not like free agency. He was a staunch opponent to it. I mean, this guy was really in charge of the Mets at this point. Lorinda DeRoulet was the owner. She had delegated a lot of responsibilities to Grant. The GM of the Mets was Joe McDonald, but it really basically was M. Donald Grant. And it got really nasty between Seaver and Grant. Dick Young was a columnist for the Daily News at that time. And once you got on Dick Young's bad side, it was like hell itself was being inflicted upon you. What's the saying? Hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn. Hell hath no fury like Dick Young's scorn. He wrote terrible articles about Seaver. Called him greedy. Called him a bunch of things. And it got to Seaver. You know, this was a proud man. This is a guy who was sensitive. He was beloved by all Mets fans. And this one reporter is going to write these things about him? It's terrible what he wrote about Seaver. The worst thing was that Young claimed that Seaver was being prodded by his wife Nancy to ask for more money because she was jealous of Nolan Ryan making more money than Seaver. No proof of that ever surfaced. Seaver, until the day he died, thought that Grant had planted that story. After that, the relationship couldn't be salvaged. And Seaver was forced to ask for a trade. He didn't want to ask for a trade, but M. Donald Grant forced his hand, along with Dick Young. So Seaver was traded to the Reds for Pat Zachary, Steve Henderson, Doug Flynn, and Dan Norman. The other parts of that Midnight Massacre included Dave Kingman being traded to the Padres and Mike Phillips being traded to the Cardinals. After those trades, the Mets really went on a downward spiral that resulted in the team eventually being sold to Nelson Doubleday. The Mets wouldn't make the playoffs until 1986 after losing the World Series in 73. You can trace it all back to those free trades. I'm telling you, the Midnight Massacre. Seaver continued his dominance. He wasn't as great with the Reds as he was with the Mets, but he was still great. On June 16th, 1978, Seaver no-hit the Cardinals. Could have very easily been as a Met. They had to wait for Johan Santana. In 79, the Reds made the playoffs. They went up against the Pirates in the NLCS. Seaver started Game 1 and pitched well. 8 innings of 2-run ball. But the Reds lost that game 5-2. The game went into extra innings, and the illustrious John McNamara pushed Tom Hume a bit too far. The biggest travesty of Seaver's career is that he only won 1 World Series and finished with a career .500 record in the postseason. 3-3. This guy should have been 20-0 and had 5 World Series. That's how dominant he was. There's no other word for it. Dominant. In fact, should have had a couple World Series MVPs along with all that. In the strike-shortened 1981 season, Seaver led all of Major League Baseball in wins and winning percentage. He went 14-2. That equates to an .875 winning percentage. He also had a .254 ERA. Yet he only had 87 strikeouts. he lost his strikeout stuff after the 78 season. In 82, Seaver had a really bad year. Went 5-13 with a 5.5 ERA, and the Reds were open to trading him. There was only one place that he wanted to go. Back to the Mets. So in 83, Seaver made his triumphant return to Flushing. Wasn't as good as he once was, but was still okay. 9-14, which isn't good, but he had a 3.55 ERA, pitched 231 innings, 135 strikeouts. The most strikeouts he had since 78. I'll take it. In the mid-80s, Major League Baseball had a free agent compensation draft. Basically, if you lost a premier free agent, you could take a player from a pool of unprotected players. And it wasn't just from the team that you signed the free agent from. So let's say this was around today. And, the Astros got a pick because Garrett Cole signed with the Yankees. They could pick someone from any major league team, not just the Yankees. The White Sox had a pick in the 84 draft because Dennis Lamp went to the Blue Jays. Frank Cashin made the biggest mistake of his career. He left Seaver off the protected list because he didn't think anyone would want to take him. He had a big salary, $750,000 at the time. That was big. And he was 39 years old. Well, the White Sox took him. Seaver had 2 really good years for the White Sox. Never finished with less than 15 wins. Had over 130 strikeouts each year. Pitched over 230 innings each year. Had an under 4 ERA each year. And on August 4th, 1985, Seaver got his 300th win against the Yankees. His career ended after the 86 season. Seaver started the year with the White Sox. He really wasn't that good. 2-6 with a 4.38 ERA. Then he was traded to the Red Sox for Steve Lyons. And he was better with a new pair of socks on. He went 5-7 with a 3.8 ERA. He wanted to come back to the Red Sox, but they couldn't reach an agreement. He tried to come back with the Mets, but he just didn't have any more bullets in the chamber. So he retired, and in 1992, Seaver set a mark that many people didn't think would be broken. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame with 98.84% of the vote. At the time, that was the highest percentage ever. Only 5 idiots voted against him. 3 of them cast blank ballots to protest the Hall's decision to not put Pete Rose on the ballot, because that's Tom Seaver's fault. The 4th one didn't notice Seaver's name on the ballot. He had just had surgery. I didn't know all this, by the way, so thank you, Wikipedia. I knew the thing about Pete Rose. I didn't know everything after that. So, I guess that guy's not an idiot, but how about you just don't send a vote in? I mean, if you just had surgery and you can't read the whole ballot, just don't send a vote in. And then the fifth idiot said he would never vote for a player on his first year of eligibility. It takes a village, I guess. After baseball, Seaver got into the wine business. And it's actually pretty good wine. GTS Wine, George Thomas Seaver. That's his real name. His real name isn't Thomas whatever Seaver. It's George Thomas Seaver. Like I said, really, really good wine. Like I said, he had been in ill health for a while. He had dementia. He couldn't remember a whole hell of a lot. So at least we can take some solace in the fact that he's no longer suffering. Last night, his family announced that he died on Monday at the age of 75 from Lewy body dementia and the coronavirus. May he rest in peace. Moving on now to Steve Nash being hired as the next head coach of my beloved Nets. I want to tell you how I first found out about this news. I set my alarms to go off at 10 a.m. That gives me enough time to get some sleep, record the podcast, edit the podcast, and do everything else that I need to do. So my alarm went off at 10 a.m. And I hear Boomer and Gio on WFAN talking about Steve Nash. And they were talking about him in a really surprising voice. Now, I'm half asleep at this point. So, the first thought that went through my groggy head was, oh my god, he died also. I get 2 texts. One from my father, and one from my buddy Mark. The text from my father read, Steve Nash, with 3 question marks. And Mark texted me a GIF of Steve Nash, just reaffirming my suspicion that he had died. I went on Twitter. I then saw the news that Steve Nash is about as far away from death as you can get. Now, thank God that the man isn't dead, okay? I'm really happy he's still alive. But imagine my surprise when I saw that he had been hired as the next head coach of the Nets. I mean, I just screamed in my room, "What?" My mom heard me scream. She came running in, "Jacob, what happened?" And I said, Steve Nash is now the next head coach of the Nets. This is stunning. There's no other word for it. Stunning, surprising, shocking, whatever word you want to use. This is so out of left field that they've actually gone into the left field parking lot and have gone about 20 miles past that. Didn't the Nets do this before with Jason Kidd? Bringing in a guy with no qualifications except he's a Hall of Fame point guard. Look, I understand that he had the benefit of being a franchise legend, and I loved the hire at the time, but I've learned my lesson since then. Kidd crashed and burned with the Nets. Derek Fisher went from an NBA point guard to being one of the worst coaches in modern NBA history with the Knicks. Look, I understand that Kevin Durant and Steve Nash have a great relationship. Nash worked with the Warriors when Durant was there. The two of them did get along. And it came out that Nash has always had an interest in coaching. He just never made it public because he didn't want it rumored. He's allowed that. If he wants that privacy, he can get it. But this is probably the riskiest hire the Nets could have made. This is riskier than Ty Lue and the possibility of another blow-up with Kyrie Irving happening again. This is riskier than bringing Jason Kidd back, which was also rumored. This is riskier than going with a first-time head coach who was just a long-time assistant. This is a guy who has never coached a game. Not a broadcaster, not an executive, nothing. He was around the Warriors as a consultant, and he got close to Durant. And obviously, he was a great player. I loved watching Steve Nash play with the Suns. Everyone did. Nash, Stoudemire, Mike D'Antoni, really, really fun teams to watch. None of that means that you should be the head coach of a team that needs to win right now. This team only has a 2 to 3 year window. It's why I wanted an experienced head coach. You can't put a first-time head coach in that position and expect him to succeed. I don't want to kill the guy before he gets started, but my God, the type of risk that Sean Marks is taking here is equivalent to putting $1 million on zero at the roulette wheel. Maybe Nash will be fine. Look, he's inheriting a roster with a ton of talent. It doesn't take a genius to coach this team. But it does take a genius to get them to win. It does take skill in this league to win. And at the end of the day, if the Nets don't win a title with Durant and Kyrie, it's going to leave a really bad taste in my mouth. You know, again, I don't want to kill him before he gets started. If Nash had taken a job with a team like the Pelicans, or the Bulls, or the Pacers, a team that really isn't expected to win right away, I would be more okay with the hire. And I actually think Nash can do a good job as a head coach. Really smart guy. No question about that. And in addition to him being a Hall of Fame point guard, he's very pro Black Lives Matter. The players are going to love him. You want to talk about a player's coach? Steve Nash is going to be a player's coach. And I like that he's keeping on Jacques Vaughn as his lead assistant. That is something that the Nets really wanted. They wanted that continuity. They like Jacques Vaughn. I like Vaughn too. I didn't think he should have been the head coach, but at the end of the day, he finished with a winning record in the seeding games with a patchwork roster. That was impressive. And in addition to all of that, even if Nash wasn't going to keep Vaughn, he needed an experienced head coach as his lead assistant. I don't know who that guy would have been, but he needed someone. Jacques Vaughn is the perfect guy to be his lead assistant. Great job. And this is supposedly the guy who the Nets keyed in on in May. When they were doing their homework, they found out that Nash was interested in coaching them, and he skyrocketed to the top of the list. So at the end of the day, Sean Marks got his guy. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I have no reason to doubt it. I find it hard to believe, though, that if Greg Popovich really became available, that Marks wouldn't have been interested in bringing him in. Or Mike D'Antoni, or Jeff Van Gundy, someone like that. I mean, the Nets wanted to make a splash here. They made a splash last year in bringing in Durant and Kyrie. They made another huge splash in bringing in Nash. Here's what I'm concerned about, though. Nash, when he wasn't playing, would lay down on the floor out of bounds because he had a spinal condition. Is he gonna do that when he's not walking up and down the court out of bounds? Or just standing by the scorer's table? I hope he does. That would be really funny. I'm not trying to make fun of his condition, but just imagine a head coach barking orders while he's laying down flat on his back. Look, I don't want to kill the guy before he gets started. Like I said, if he had gone to a different city, I'd have been okay with this move. But this is just way too risky for my blood. I wouldn't have done it if I was Marks. I like that he has a relationship with Durant, and as a former point guard, he's going to be able to connect with Kyrie Irving, and he has experience dealing with mercurial personalities. He dealt with Kobe Bryant and Dwight Howard when he was with the Lakers. I think this can work, but there's a strong possibility that it doesn't, that this just turns into Jason Kidd 2.0. I'm not a huge fan of this move. Like I said, I would have preferred Jeff Van Gundy, Mike Brown, Greg Popovich, any one of the guys who I mentioned in my Nets offseason preview. Moving on now to the NBA playoff games that happened yesterday. I will start with Heat Bucks. And playoff Jimmy Butler showed up again. The ice in the veins to hit those free throws. I understand the second one didn't matter, but he still hit it. I mean, I'll tell you, if I was in that position to win a playoff game for my team, I think I know myself well enough to know that I wouldn't be able to hit those shots. If you didn't see what happened, I'll tell you what happened. The Heat were up 6 with like 15 seconds left to go. It's Bucks ball. Giannis dunks it home to make it a 4-point game. Jimmy Butler throws a terrible pass. He called it a terrible IQ play. In other news, water is wet. Brook Lopez stole it and laid it in to make it a 2-point Heat lead. Jimmy Butler gets the ball again. The Bucks foul. And Butler hits one of 2 free throws. Jacob, you just said he hit both. What are you talking about? I'm getting to that. The score is 114-111 Heat, with about 5 seconds left. Chris Middleton gets fouled while attempting a 3. He hits all 3 of his free throws to tie the game at 114. Then Jimmy Butler gets the ball with 4 seconds left. He makes a move on Giannis. Giannis fouls him with no time left on the clock. And I'm not kidding. There was literally no time left. It was a foul. No question about that in my mind. Butler hit both free throws, and the Heat won. One of the craziest endings that you will ever see. It was followed up by another crazy ending in the Rockets-Thunder game, but I'll get into that in a minute. The Heat had a really impressive offense. 7 players scored at least 11 points. Crowder with 16, Butler with 13, Bam with 15, Dragic with 23, Robinson with 13, Hero with 17, and Olynyk with 11. That's the thing with this Heat team. They're so well-rounded. That's what's giving the Bucks trouble. The Bucks are so star-centric that they don't have anyone who can match the combined production of guys like Dragic and Bam and Hero and guys like that. Yes, they have Chris Middleton, but they need more. I mean, the Bucks were good. This actually was a well-rounded effort by them, just not as well-rounded as the Heat were. They only had 5 players in double digits. Giannis had a double-double, 29 and 14. Middleton had 23. Brook Lopez and Eric Bledsoe each had 16. And George Hill, off the bench, had 14. If I was going to pin this loss on anyone, it would be Wesley Matthews. I don't blame Giannis for fouling Butler. I mean, this was a physical game. Both teams combined for 71 free throws. That really didn't bother me too much that Giannis fouled him. Yeah, obviously, it's not a good look, but it fit with the flow of the game. It's really hard to turn that off in that exact moment. But Wesley Matthews, playing 30 minutes and only scoring 4 points, only shooting 2 for 8 from the field, 0 for 2 from beyond the arc, that's inexcusable. And now the Bucks are in a hole that I don't know if they can climb out of. I did say Bucks in 6, so it's still possible, but I am not confident at all in that pick. The way the Heat are playing, I don't see how they lose 4 games out of their next 6. Moving on now to Thunder Rockets. And like I said, this was another crazy ending. The defense by James Harden. A guy who has been criticized for his defense in the past. That's what won the Rockets the game here. I mean, if you had told me that James Harden was going to win this game, I'd believe you. But I'd have said that he's going to go for like 35 or 40. No. With Luguentz Dort getting the ball after a failed setup by the Thunder, Harden makes a picture-perfect block on a 3. There are some coaches that don't want their players to go up and block 3s. They just want them to put their hand in the shooter's face. Don't actually leap up and try to swat it out of the air because you end up fouling the shooter. But Harden executed a picture-perfect block Dort gets the ball back. He tries to throw it off of James Harden's leg. And Harden leaps up like a gymnast. Spreads his legs open like he was playing tunnel tag. And the ball sails out of bounds. Rockets ball. What a great way for Harden to salvage an otherwise dismal performance. Because Dort was stifling him defensively. Harden only shot 4 for 15 from the field. He only shot 1 for 9 from beyond the arc. Now, he got to the free throw line a lot because, of course he did, he's James Harden. But you've got to do more than just hit 4 free throws if you're the best player on the team. Jeff Green hit more field goals than Harden did. You've got to give the other Rockets credit for picking up the load offensively. Russell Westbrook dropping 20. Jeff Green dropping 13 off the bench. And they weren't even the high men. Robert Covington had a double-double. He had 21 points, 10 rebounds, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. A fantastic game. And Eric Gordon also had 21 points. The fact that the Rockets were able to win this game, despite Harden having an off night offensively, bodes really well for their chances against the Lakers. I'm not saying they're going to win that series, but it's a good sign that they were able to win this game. As for the Thunder, they have nothing to be ashamed about here. They played great. Luguentz Dort, I didn't want him to take that many shots, but you know what? When you drop 30 points, son, you take as many shots as you want. Chris Paul with a triple-double in a Game 7. The definition of clutch. He's the oldest player in NBA history to do that. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with 19 points. Steven Adams, 10 points, 9 rebounds. The final possession, Adams wanted the ball in the low post. The Thunder didn't get it to him. That was a terrible job of coaching by Billy Donovan. You have that mismatch there, use it. I've been screaming for that for days. They didn't listen to me. They never listened to me. That's why they lost. Because they didn't utilize that mismatch. They tried to set up a play for a wide open 3 and don't just take the given 2. Don't force it. Terrible job by Donovan in never utilizing that mismatch. Alright, now it's time to preview Raptors-Celtics. For the Raptors, they have to be better offensively. It's just that simple. I know that sounds really obvious, but I can't make anything up. The Raptors have been dreadful in this series, offensively. They've only shot 38.5% from the field and 26.3% from beyond the arc. Pascal Siakam has been a non-factor. He has to get going. He's the guy who I'm going to key in on. If Pascal Siakam does not have a big game, if he doesn't go for at least 20, the Raptors are going to lose this game. As for the Celtics, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to do anything crazy. What you've been doing has been working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The coaching of Brad Stevens in this series has been great. Benching Inez Cantor for Robert Williams has worked. Fantastic job of coaching. There's no other way to say it. This is a scary Celtics team, and they're doing this without Gordon Hayward. That just makes it that much more impressive. There is another NBA game tonight, and that is Nuggets-Clippers. It is the first game of that series, so I get to make a pick. If the Nuggets are going to win this series, they need Murray and Jokic to go off. It's just that simple. We saw Murray go off against the Jazz, and we saw what Jokic was capable of in Game 7. He's one of, if not the best center in the NBA. I'd also like them to get Michael Porter Jr. a little more involved. Gary Harris needs to step up. Paul Millsap needs to step up. If the Nuggets are going to beat this superior Clippers team, they need all their guys cooking. It's just that simple. But like I said, the Clippers are the superior team. Kawhi, Paul George, who's gotten out of his funk, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Landry Shamet, Patrick Beverley should be back tonight. I really don't see how the Nuggets are going to be able to match up with this team. Beverley, I think, is going to be a huge factor. He's going to make Jamal Murray work. Murray will get his, but he's not going to go off like he did against Donovan Mitchell. All in all, I'm going to say Clippers in 5. I really don't see the Nuggets taking any more than a game. Moving on now to yesterday's hockey game, Avalanche Stars. And Michael Hutchinson really should have been starting from the beginning. This is insane. This guy comes out of nowhere. He was a third-string goalie. Very few people had ever heard of this guy. And he comes in, plays well in Game 5, and then in Game 6, he just stones the Stars. What he has done cannot be overstated. He has single-handedly brought the Avalanche back into this series. Great job by Jared Bednar in listening to me to start him in the first place. The biggest moment of this game was the Nikita Zadorov goal. Miro Heiskanen makes it 1-0 Stars less than 2 minutes later with like 30 seconds left in the first period. Zadorov scores to tie the game at 1. The Avalanche have all the momentum, and they score 3 more goals after that to win the game 4-1. They looked dead in this series early on. Now, they have all the momentum. Hutchinson has brought them back from the abyss, and I really think they're going to win tomorrow. In this Game 7, I'm picking the Avalanche. I'll tell you right now. I said earlier that they were going to represent the Western Conference in the Stanley Cup Finals. I wasn't confident in that pick when this series got going, but now I'm back to being confident. The Colorado Avalanche are going to be one of the 2 teams vying for Lord Stanley's Cup. But we have to see who they're going to go up against first. And it could be the Flyers, but it'll most likely be the Islanders. I picked them in Game 5, and that didn't go well, so I'd be lying to you if I said I was 100% confident in picking the Islanders, but I'm still very confident. I'm at like 98% confidence. The one thing I'll say is if they lose this game, they're in trouble. The Flyers will have all the momentum. I understand that Hart hasn't played this way in this series, but Carter Hart is better than Semyon Varlamov. It's just that simple. In a Game 7, I'm going to take the better goalie. It's going to be very interesting to see who gets out to the first lead and if they can hold it. Because realize, the Flyers have had big leads in both their wins, and then they blew it. They were up 2 in the third period in both of their wins. They blew the leads, and they had to win in overtime. That's not a sustainable strategy. The Islanders will inevitably beat that. The odds that you're going to win 4 straight overtime games is astronomical. Once you get that lead, that multi-goal lead, and you're in the third period, play smart defensive hockey. Don't let them into the offensive zone easily, and this goes for both teams. Force shots from the outside. Don't let the other team get any good chances, and you'll win this game. Play smart defensive hockey. It's just that simple. Moving on now to Golden Knights Canucks. And I really think the Golden Knights have it here. The Canucks did not impress me in Game 5. They got more than doubled up in shots. I mean, the only reason they won that game was because Thatcher Demko looked like the second coming of Roberto Luongo. At the end of the day, I don't see Demko doing that again. Any player can go off on any given day. I don't think Demko's that good, to tell you the truth. He had a great Game 5, I give him full credit, but I don't think he's going to be able to duplicate it. I think the Golden Knights are going to win today by a score of 3-1. There are a few other sports stories that I want to talk about. The first one concerns Leonard Fournette signing with the Buccaneers for 1 year for at least $2 million. This is a fantastic move for the Buccaneers. Yes, they didn't need Fournette. I'm not a big Ronald Jones fan, but I am a big Keyshawn Vaughn fan. And they signed LeSean McCoy. I thought that committee of Jones, McCoy, and Vaughn could have worked. I mean, they have Tom Brady. They don't need, Cadillac Williams back there. They have Mike Evans. They have Chris Godwin. They have Rob Gronkowski. They don't need a 1,000-yard back to be successful. But to add a player like Fournette in this win-now year makes perfect sense. I'd imagine he's going to get the bulk of the carries. What I'd really like is for the Bucs to go with a depth chart of Fournette, Vaughn, and Jones. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But you cannot overstate how great this move is. The Buccaneers no longer have any weaknesses on offense. This is a fantastic move. Moving on now to the Patriots cutting Mohamed Sanu. And I am really surprised at this. Less than a year ago, the Patriots traded a second rounder for this guy. And now they're giving up on him? Look, I understand he didn't set the world on fire there. Only 26 catches for 207 yards and 1 touchdown. But Julian Edelman needs some support. You know, I would say bring back Josh Gordon, but he just signed with the Seahawks for 1 year at $1 million. I hope it works out for him this time around. No denying the talent he is, he just hasn't been able to keep his head screwed on straight. Maybe they'll bring back Antonio Brown. Who knows? This move doesn't make a lot of sense. He'd make perfect sense for the Jets. They desperately need wide receivers. I've said this before, they're dealing with a bunch of injuries there. They need all the help they can get. Sanu would go a long way towards helping Sam Darnold out. Moving on now to a story that broke just as I was posting yesterday's show. And that is the Blues trading Jake Allen and their 7th rounder in 2022 to the Canadiens for the Capitals' 3rd rounder this year and the Blackhawks' 7th rounder this year. Jake Allen is a solid 1B goalie in this league. He makes a ton of sense to bring in behind Carey Price. And the Canucks rode Price hard. They played 71 games in the regular season. Price started 58 of them. And he's not getting any younger. He's 33 years old. I'm not saying he's past his prime or anything. He's still one of the best goalies in the NHL. You saw it in the playoffs. But he's led the NHL in minutes played for a goalie in back-to-back years now. That's not sustainable. The Habs really needed a backup goalie. They couldn't have done much better than Jake Allen. To get a quality backup for a 3rd rounder and a swap of 7ths is an absolute steal. The Canadiens easily win this deal. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that if they had 75,000 fans for the opener, then they must have given out about 300,000 free tickets.